The country was in the middle of a world war with shortages everywhere, but a new idea for the kids and families was happening at Randall and Story City. Pastor Albert Bringle, the new pastor, had an idea and people were excited. It was a time when people opened up and gave of themselves, and it seemed like all were pulling for the camp. There were a few skeptics, but I watched my Uncle Henry and Aunt Nora Shea pitch in, and when Pastor Bringle got approval to have a camp in the woods that Osmond Mortfeet owned, all were excited and ready to make it a great event. Henry became Pastor Bringle's right-hand man. That first year, and the next several years, and until his death, Henry worked hard with and for the Bible camp. Also, Nora in those early years did end up doing all the food buying and managing the kitchen and all the other things that made the camp work. She and Hank were a team that worked long and hard and enjoyed every minute of it. One final item needs to be shared about Riverside Bible Camp. It was a place of inspiration and spiritual enrichment, physically uplifting and just plain fun. We studied the Bible, made lifelong friends, and realized that our faith and religious beliefs were exciting and active and a source of strength that some of us had never even imagined it could be. I know that literally thousands of youth have been confronted with Christ and have opened themselves up to the Holy Spirit, which has blessed them because of their experience at Riverside Bible Camp.
January 1943, Reverend AJ Bringle, at the age of 44, was installed as pastor of the Elam, Bethel, and North St. Petri Lutheran Parish in the vicinity of Randall and Story City, Iowa. As with all pastors, he had some goals for ministry in his new setting. Among those goals, establishing a Bible camp was a top priority. Bible camps were, of course, not new to him. In earlier years, he had started two, one in South Dakota, another in Wisconsin. His interest in camps was also evidenced by his having served on the National Bible Camp Committee of his church. Pastor Bringle began his search soon for a site in the area suitable for a Bible camp. That search quickly came to an end, for on February 22nd, 1943, the very month following his arrival in Randall, through God's guidance, he came upon a site that in his mind could be made into a Bible camp. It was just a cow pasture near a river, but he had the creativity and the foresight to see what it could become. As Pastor Bringle sat down on a log on the bank of the river, he dreamed of great things. For many people, such dreams would have been simply that, just dreams, but not for AJ Bringle. Pastor Bringle went to the landowner, telling him what he had in mind. Mr. Mortfeet graciously agreed to the idea, saying, "If you can make anything of the place, go ahead." Now, how did all this happen? It all happened because God worked in the life of his servant AJ Bringle and so many others. One of the key characteristics necessary for the successful establishment and building of Riverside was Pastor Bringle's ability in securing volunteer labor. As one former board member put it, AJ Bringle was quite a promoter and organizer. Practically every building was built with volunteer help. He would often have several projects going at once. If there were too many for one project, he'd send them off to something else. The volunteers received their recognition, though. In some notes on the early Bible camp days in the Randall Review, there were as many as 92 names mentioned as helpers just for 1 week. In addition to making ends meet by securing considerable volunteer help, Pastor Bringle also saved the camp money by obtaining items for the camp inexpensively and taking so-called shortcuts whenever possible. He'd also make things stretch as far as possible. An example was told by one of the many volunteers at Riverside, Clara Henryson. There was a mattress at camp that was big enough that it could serve as two separate mattresses. Pastor Bringle brought it to Mrs. Henryson and asked her to cut it in two and then sew up the seams. He was known for getting anything to work in order to get by until the money would come along. It didn't just happen. There was enough money for the projects that he wanted to build. He knew that the camp was really God's Bible camp, and that God would see to the development of it. Those who worked closely with Pastor Bringle will never forget the faith that he had, the ambition he had to drive and move ahead.
Albert Jacob Bringle was born April 10, 1898 in Superior, Iowa. He was baptized and confirmed in the State Line Lutheran Church, Iowa. He graduated from St. Olaf College in 1922 and Luther Theological Seminary in 1925. On August 12, 1925, he was united in marriage with Mildred Stensby in Dalyville, Wisconsin. They had 4 children, Irene, John, Paul, and Thelma. His wife, Mildred, died in 1940. On August 8, 1953, he married Clarice Casa in Red Wing, Minnesota. During his ministry, he served parishes at Eureka, Kansas, Del Rapids, South Dakota, Taylor, Wisconsin, Randall and Story City, Iowa, and Strawberry Point, Iowa. He organized and began Bible camps in Del Rapids, Taylor, and Story City. In January 1943, he founded Riverside Bible Camp in Story City, Iowa. He retired from parish ministry in 1963 and returned to Riverside as full-time director, also serving as interim pastor in Ellsworth and Randall. In 1970, he retired as director of the camp and continued as building director until June 1974, when he and Mrs. Bringle retired to Lake City, Minnesota.
As our family moved from Wisconsin to Iowa on a cold day in January 1943, I'm sure my dad's mind was filled with many thoughts about his new parish. But knowing our father, I'm sure he also wondered if he would find a place to continue one of the important parts of his ministry, working with young people through Bible camp. We all remember the day he came home to say, "I think I found a good place for a Bible camp." Within a day or two, we all piled in the car to see the land where he hoped there would be a camp. I would like to read from a notebook of his where he describes the first visit to this site. Shortly after being installed as pastor in the 3 churches of the parish, the thought of and possibility of having a Bible camp were very much upon my heart. Having had moving pictures taken of the Trample Valley Bible Camp, films were sent for and shown at a Luther League meeting in Elam Church on Sunday evening, February 21st. On Monday the 22nd, while driving to Story City, taking the road through Christytown, I was attracted by the fine sight of trees and river just to the east of the road before crossing the bridge. Stopping the car, I went a short distance into the pasture and was stopped by a colony of bees on the north bank of the river. The place looked good, but the question of who owned the land came to mind, and if it would be a member of one of the churches of the parish. At a Sunday school meeting the following day, I was told that Mr. O.A. Northfit owned the land. At a reception held in our honor the next Friday, I singled out O.A. Northfit and told him I'd been looking at the spot in his pasture near the river and wondered if this place could be used for a camp in the summer. It was a tense moment as I waited for his answer. It was a good and welcome answer. There are several versions of what he said, but my father's version here was, "Sure, go ahead. I have more land than I can work," or something like that. I stopped and looked the place over again, and it looked still better. The bees seemed very much at home, but OA said they could be moved. On Sunday evening, March 20th, the pictures of the Trample Valley Bible Camp were shown again. I told of OA's promise that his pasture could be used, and asked what should be done about a camp. Though not many said much about having a camp, no one spoke against it. And using that as an argument for the camp, the motion was carried that a camp be planned for the following summer. A Bible Camp Workers Committee was appointed. The pastor decided to set aside Mondays of each week for work on the Bible campground. The first date was Monday, April 26th. In the church chimes for the week, the following comment was carried. Last Monday, the groundbreaking was begun. It was not very impressive as a few men worked in a drizzling rain, digging up some wild bushes, and others struggled with some long poles to be used for a bridge. It was the beginning of what may in time become a very beautiful and useful place. I remember the impromptu visits that happened the first spring and summer, as my dad would say, "Let's go to the camp for a picnic." We would hear about his plans for camp and where the cabins, the bridge, the dining room, and of course the swimming pool should be. We were fascinated when Osmond Mortfit used a willow branch, or water witch as it was called, to find water. I remember the early Monday morning phone calls that first year and for many of the early years, lining up workers for the day and sometimes for the week. Nelson Thora Quam, who were good friends and strong supporters of the camp even though they left Randall in the early years. Nelson Quam wrote an article, The Cross and a Cow Pasture, which many of you have read. It appeared in the Lutheran Standard in 1947, and it talks about the founder of Riverside and a little about what kind of person would build a Bible camp in a pasture. He said, certain individuals seem to have a knack for seeing what is needed in a community. Quite often with this knack there is the ability, the will, and the courage to meet that need. Typical is the Reverend AJ Bringle. He, like so many of our pastors, is concerned about keeping our youth in the church. A husky, outdoorsy-looking man, father of 4 children himself, Pastor Bringle covets the best in life for all young people. His consuming passion is to present Christ to them as best of the best.
I remember the first summer I was looking for a place to have a camp, and he go by Riverside. And one of the people that lived over there said he would never get that. He talked to Osmond, and Osmond said you could have it for a week for camp. And then Osmond even drilled the well for it the first year.
Do you remember the old pool, what that was like?
The bottom was muddy, you know. The water came from that artesian well, and it was very cold.
1949 was a milestone year at Riverside as plans for a new chapel were put in place. Of course, there had been a chapel previously at Riverside, a wood frame structure built that was brought in from Camp Comar. There was general agreement, however, that a new chapel should be built. As plans were being made, there were 2, you might say, schools of thought on the location for the new facility. The board's viewpoint was that the chapel should be located in the shade in the vicinity of the present volleyball court. Pastor Bringle and the architects, though, wanted the chapel situated out in the open where the sun would dry the chapel's wood shingles. And there was clear agreement that the building should have shingles of wood. Of course, we know the outcome of that debate on the location for the new structure. There was also some discussion regarding the general design of the chapel. Pastor Bringle clearly stated that it should be unique, and it was beautiful. With the plans for the chapel complete, construction was set to commence. Groundbreaking took place in 1949. Herman Hermanson was the master builder. He and 3 other men worked throughout the summer of 1950. It was said that raising the beams which support the 38-foot high ceiling was like raising a tower. The chapel was ready for use in the 1951 camp season. The finished project received many accolades. As noted in the June 18, 1951 edition of the Story City Herald, the design of the Riverside Chapel won first prize in a contest sponsored by the Minnesota Society of Architects. 2 of the 3 architects were St. Olaf College Art Department professors Edward Solik and Arnold Flotten. The total cost of the chapel was $20,000.
With respect to Bringle, his thinking was always several months ahead of the board. He always brought 1 or more surprises to our board meetings. His ability to visualize was one of his strong characteristics, and we know he did some bartering and friendly plotting to obtain some of the land acquisitions. We weren't sure, but suspected there may have been some deals cut before the board met. Our board, like most boards, was quite conservative and just couldn't spend money that we didn't have. Not so with Pastor Bringle. He had his neck way out on faith that things would work out, and they usually did. Pastor Bringle's most obvious contribution to our community was the Bible camp. He could somehow get people to donate time and money to one project after another. Each step was not very large by itself, but they all fit together, and when Bringle the salesman was ready for the next step, somehow the right people responded. The workmanship served the purpose, and Bringle would thank and praise those who helped. Usually, he started another project before the last one was finished. He was God's workman, and he was in a hurry.
It was a great joy to me to get to know Pastor and Mrs. Bringle the years that we overlapped here. AJ and I, we built together the East Addition on the house down on the main camp. And it was a beautiful time to start working here at Riverside, getting to know AJ very, very well as a real brother and friend in ministry of Bible camping. But I want to just close with one verse here that AJ gave to me as we were building on the house down there that fall of 70. And I know he preached on this a lot of times. I've heard him talk on it. Isaiah 54 verse 2, kind of his theme verses for Riverside, as I understand it. Enlarge the place of your tent. Stretch your tent curtains wide. Do not hold back. Lengthen your cords. Strengthen your stakes. Keep moving forward. That was Pastor Bringle, and that's what this camp, by God's grace, has been doing now for 50 years. May God grant another 50 and more.
And we ask, how may we magnify and amplify the name of Christ in such a way that we don't have to depend upon loudspeakers. We see Him as a Savior who comes to save us at all times. That we see Him as one who is mighty to save and able to save, and that there is a desire in His heart that He should save all men. They may come to the knowledge of the truth. To magnify Christ is to exalt His name. The psalmist said, "O magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt His name together."